Hi guys. In this session, let's discuss about what is database and what is data warehouse and the difference between database and data warehouse. First, let's see what is database. So we can call anything as a database which holds the data. So wherever we store the data, we will call it as database. For example, Notepad, Excel, Word, anything. So if I have some data, then I can call that as database. Okay, so now let's discuss about data. What is data and what kind of data we're going to store in the database? So the technical definition for the data is a data is a related fact which has future reference value. So data is a valid fact which has future reference value, then only we're going to store that in the database. Otherwise, we are not going to store it. So let's say, for example, I have to travel from my place to Tirupati. Now, how can I go there? Somebody told me when I inquired them, they said that just take XYZ bus from the bus station, bus stand, which will go to Tirupati. So that's what the information I got from them. So the same information is given to you, then you will store that data. You'll store that one as data. So only when you want to refer it next time. Otherwise, you won't. Let's say if I'm walking on a road and I'm seeing so many cars and so many number plates on that. Am I remembering all those? Definitely not, because I don't need to remember those because I'm never going to refer it back. But XYZ bus at 11 p.m. from bus stand, I may go to Tirupati in future, so that's why I'm storing the data. So that means it must be related to me and it must be a fact and it has the future reference value. Then only I'm going to store that in the database. So that is data. Okay, and there are different forms of databases out there. So based on how you are storing the data. So the most important form of databases available is RDBMS, Relational Database Management Systems. So in which you will maintain the data in the form of tables. Now RDBMS has become so popular and almost all database servers are following the same way for storing the data. So they are storing the data in two-dimensional format, so that is in form of rows and columns. And the data warehouse. So what is meant by data warehouse? So the data warehouse is also a database. So there is no difference. So we'll call the same. So whenever you create a database, we can use that one as a data warehouse. So why we are calling that one as a data warehouse? So why we are calling that one as database? So what is the difference between database and data warehouse? So in database, we're gonna store the current information, our current records, our live records, and in data warehouse, we're gonna store the historical data, historical information, or aged data. So now let's see one example. So why we are storing the data in different places, and live data in one place and historical data in one another database. Why we are storing that information in different databases? We'll see that one with an example. Let's say I'm the CEO, I'm the owner of ICICI Bank. Okay, I'm the CEO or owner of ICICI Bank, and I'll be storing the data or transactions in this database. So what is the transaction here? Let's say I'm running a supermarket, and if any customer comes to store and buys a soap, that's a transaction to me. If any customer buys a chocolate, that's a transaction to me. So the transaction is nothing but which will store all the transactional information or all the sales information. So the transaction is nothing but it directly says how the business is going on. And if you take the bank, let's say the customer A deposited few amount, customer B credited with some amount, customer C transferred some amount to some another guy. So in the same way, all those transactions they are capturing into these databases. In this database. So how many transactions made by a customer in 1 month or in last month? That says how the bank business is going and how the customer transactions are going on. So every transaction they are capturing here. What happens if you don't capture this? Suppose if you call your bank customer care of the bank that you are having the account, and you ask, okay, what are the transactions I made in last month? And if they say, sorry, we don't have that information with me, so then what will be your response? Obviously, we'll shout at them, right? Why? Because it's their job to maintain all the records. So here, all you know, this ICICI Bank is having billions of customers, right? Let's say here, ICICI Bank is having only 1 lakh customers. I'm just taking the minimum count here, and each customer is doing 2 transactions per day. Then, how many records they're gonna store here in this database? 1 lakh records multiplies by 2 transactions per day, so 2 lakh records we're gonna store in the database on regular basis. So every day we need to store 2 transactions. Then what about for a week? What about the count? So that is 14 lakhs, right? And what about month? It's something around 60 lakhs. And what about year? It's 7.2 crores. So how they're gonna store this? How they're gonna make use of this data? So now here they'll store only the current data, and they'll move all the remaining to another database. Another database. Let's say, for example, go to any bank in India and try to get the last 1 year transactions of your account. Uh, will you get it? So you won't. You can get for last 3 months bank statement. After that, if you want for more, then you have to raise a request, and bank statement will be mailed to you through email. So this is how it happens in the banking sites, in the banks. So why they don't store all the data here in this database? Let's say I have an application which inserts, updates, and deletes the data. And this application is running on this database, which will maintain all the transactions. So if the transactional database continuously growing, and it become like terabyte or 2 terabyte in size, right? And if I see the transaction data, it is going like billions and billions. For every insert, update, and modify, I have to query this database, and the performance will be very big hit here. So what people will do is they'll set some interval like, okay, let's keep only last 1 month information and push the remaining information into another database. So we'll call that one as data warehouse. So we'll call that one as data warehouse. They move data either after 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. It just depends on how much data is flowing into the database per day or per month. So here, data warehouse is also a database which we don't touch it frequently. And this application will talk only with this database. And the reports part will talk with data warehouse. Why? Because to see how the history was, what was the data, how many transactions happened in last 1 year or last 2 years or last 5 years. So we need to connect with the data warehouse. We need to get the information from the data warehouse. So why we are moving the data from this database to another database, data warehouse, just to keep this application performance in good shape. We are moving the data. We are moving the data from this database to another database. So this is a database where the transactions will be happening, and this is called data warehouse, where all the historical data or old data will be moved to. Now database will be easy to query now. So there will be hardly 50 lakh records or 60 lakh records or 1 crore records in this database, and it will be easy for them to query the data. If you maintain all the data in the same database, the performance of the application will be very poor. For example, if you try to deposit some amount in the bank, so what bank I will do? First, they'll check your account status. So to check the account status, if you query the data where you have all the information, all the data in one place, if it is taking lot of time like 30 minutes or 40 minutes time, imagine one deposit is taking 30 minutes time. Is it possible scenario in like a country in India? So what they'll do is frequently, very frequently, they'll move all their historical data into another database, and we'll call the database as data warehouse. And of course, this job will be done by using SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services. We'll call that one as a ETL tool, which is used to move the data from one place to another place, one database to one database. So using this SSIS, you can move the data from one single database to one single destination, otherwise multiple sources to one single destination. You can move it. So why we are moving this one? Why we are moving the data from this database to this database? Just to keep the application performance in good shape. So this is data warehouse. So in this database, in the data warehouse, just we are maintaining the historical records, historical data, or old data, or we can call it as age data. And in this database, we are storing only current records or live records. Just based on the flow of data, how much data is sitting into your database, how much data is coming into the database per day, based on the flow, we are moving the data from one this database to another database just to keep the application performance in good shape. So if your database performance is good, then obviously the performance of your application will be good, right? So to keep the performance of this application, I'm moving the data from this database to one another database. I'll call that one as data warehouse. So what happens if I don't store the data in the data warehouse? Let's say in this database, just to keep the application performance in good shape, I'll maintain only last 1 month sales, otherwise last 3 months information, last 3 months data in this database. And if I delete the previous data, what happens? You won't get the analysis part, right? You can't check the trend, like what is the difference between last month sales to current month sales, what is the difference between last 3 month sales to current 3 month sales, I mean last quarter to this quarter, last sem to this sem, last year to this year. You can't check this, you can't analyze these kind of scenarios. Let's say I started my business in 2010 year. From 2010 year, if I don't store the data in my database, if I have only 3 months information, last 3 months information, what about, how can I check, how can I say that in the first year of my business, I mean when I started my business, in the first year this is my sales, and in the second year this is my sales. How can I give that information? And every year my business is growing like this, every year my business is improving 10%, 10% share. How can I give that information? How can I show the trend when I don't have the data with me? So we never delete the data. We may use the data in future for analysis purpose. So what we'll do is we'll try to store the data in one another database. So we'll call the database as data warehouse. So warehouse is nothing but it's like a godown. It's like a storeroom in your house. So what will store in the storeroom? So we'll store unused items in the storeroom, right? So why we are not throwing the items out, instead of sorry, why we are storing that items in the storeroom? Why we are not throwing out? Why? Because we may use it in future. We may use that items in the future. That's why we are storing that items in the storeroom. So if I think that okay, I won't use these items in future also, then I'll delete it. I mean, then I'll throw it out. But we may use it in the future. That's why we are storing that unused items in the storeroom. In the same way, in data warehouse, we'll store the data. Why? Because we may use the data in future. For analysis purpose, we'll use the data in future. So we'll use the data. That's why we are storing the data in data warehouse. So we'll call this database as OLTP database, online transactional processing, and we'll call this data warehouse as OLAP, online analytical processing. So online transactional processing on regular basis, you're processing the data, your regular updates, deletes, modifications are you're doing some modifications on this database on regular basis. Whereas in this OLAP, always you'll run only select statement. We'll use this data warehouse just to query the information, just to analyze the data. So this data warehouse reads the historical data for the users for business decisions. And in this OLTP database, we'll use whenever you're modifying the data on regular basis. So on regular basis, you are inserting the data, you're modifying the data. That is nothing but your OLTP. So whenever you use the data, whenever you are using the data for analysis purpose, so that is nothing but OLTP. So most of the cases in data warehouse always will load the data into data warehouse. So in very few cases we'll go with select statement. So not few cases, I'm sorry, very few cases will go with the loading part. But in data warehouse always will run the select statement. Why? Because whenever you want to check the trends, that trend information is available. That previous business historical data, previous business data is available in your data warehouse only. But in the live data, in the current databases, you have only limited data, and every day the new data is coming. So regular updates, regular modifications you are doing in this OLTP database. Okay, and in this database, whenever you are creating these kind of databases, using normalization concept will design this database. So using normalization concept will try to improve the performance. Why? Because on regular basis you are inserting the data, you're updating the data, you're deleting the data. So relational modeling techniques are used for this RDBMS database design. And for this data warehousing, modeling techniques which are used for data warehousing, that is denormalization. So in denormalized way, we'll store the data in data warehouse. So these databases are optimized for writing operations, and these data warehouses are optimized for reading operations. And if you try to analyze the data using database, the performance is very low. So the performance is low for analysis queries, analysis purpose. And this data warehouse is good for analysis. So the high performance for analytical queries. Okay, so that is the difference between database and data warehouse. Both are databases, but in database we'll store the current records or live records, and in data warehouse we'll store the historical data or old data or aged data. Clear? So that's about database and data warehouse. So that's it for my end. If you have any questions, you can ask me.